This week on Christian World News, historic shift. The U.S. changes its stance towards Cuba. How will it affect religious freedom?
Plus, Christmas in prison. In a letter from an Iranian jail, American pastor Saeed Abedini reminds us that Christ came to a dark and dangerous world.
And the crisis in Ukraine continues. Why the Russian bear isn't backing off, and how one Christian ministry is helping the victims of war. The United States normalizes relations with communist Cuba. Hello, everyone. I'm George Thomas.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. U.S. President Obama says the time has come to make friends with Cuba's regime. But not all Cuban Americans are happy about that. They say we should not be rewarding a harsh dictator. Ephraim Graham has more.
We want to see greater freedom, greater prosperity, greater opportunity for ordinary Cubans.
President Obama went public with a deal reached in secret Wednesday. He's restoring full diplomatic relations with Cuba for the first time since the height of the Cold War. The deal follows Cuba's release of U.S. government contractor Alan Gross and another American intelligence operative in exchange for Cuban spies held in the U.S. Gross was imprisoned for 5 years.
I'm incredibly blessed finally to have the freedom to resume a positive and constructive life.
The deal is the beginning of the end of 5 decades of the U.S. economic blockade of Cuba. It calls for a review of Cuba's status as a state sponsor of terrorism, clears the path for the U.S. to open an embassy in Havana, and opens the door for Americans to visit the largest island in the Caribbean.
I think it's great. It's about time.
But there's also protest in places like Miami's Little Havana community. Outcries from families who lost loved ones in 1996 when Cuban fighters shot their planes down.
The worst president that we have in this country for many years.
The president could also face a fight in Congress. Senator Marco Rubio spoke out against the deal, calling President Obama the worst negotiator since Jimmy Carter.
These changes will only lead to greater wealth and influence for this oppressive regime, especially the military.
This is a legacy for the president who is now a lame duck. There's not a lot he can get done, but he can do big things like this to a considerable degree. And he wants it for the legacy that he'll get out of it with the left wing of his party.
And in social media, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham tweeted that he vows to block the opening of a U.S. embassy in Cuba. And presidential hopeful Jeb Bush also tweeted, calling this a massive executive overreach. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
And joining us now with more insight into the recent developments with the Cuba-U.S. relations is Mike Gonzalez, a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Mike, great to have you on the broadcast. Listen, you know, the communist regime in Cuba has severely restricted religious freedom there for many, many years. What has the church in Cuba been dealing with in this area now?
Well, as you know, communism is a totalitarian ideology. It does not accept any rivals, and therefore it does not it does not permit any really true religious liberty. When I was there as a child, for example, I was an altar boy. I remember one mass that I serviced at, a mob threw in a rock in the middle of the church in the middle of mass, and I remember being very scared. Later still, I left in 1972, but later still things got very bad. I had a cousin who's now luckily left Cuba, who didn't even know the Our Father until he was taught it in his bedroom by my grandmother, our common grandmother, who taught it afraid that other people would know that he knew the Our Father.
Do you think these changes could make religious freedom better in Cuba?
No, in fact, Cubans can practice Catholicism today, but again, but if they do, and if you're known as a Catholic, you may not be able to join university, you may not be able to get the job you want, and you may not get the promotion you want. All these things being a function of your political allegiance to communism and the Castro brothers.
Okay, Mike Gonzalez, sir, thank you so much for providing some insight into the situation there, especially as it deals with religious freedom.
Thank you, George, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, sir, too.
Iranian-American pastor Saeed Abedini will spend another Christmas in an Iranian jail. He recently wrote a Christmas letter to his family and supporters. Even though he recognized his harsh conditions, he wrote of how Jesus came to the world in cold, harsh conditions as well. He wrote, "We should be able to tolerate the cold, the difficulties, and the shame in order to serve God. We should be able to enter into the pain of the cold, dark world. Then we are able to give the fiery love of Christ to the cold, wintry manger of those who are spiritually dead." The American Center for Law and Justice is working for Saeed's release. Earlier, our Mark Martin spoke with ACLJ's Jordan Seculo about the latest.
Give us an update on the efforts to free Saeed.
Well, you know, this has been a very difficult time, as Saeed acknowledged in his letter. There have been these longer periods of time without anyone to be able to visit him because of the rules around who's able to visit him during the weekly visits that are allowed. This was the first visit, the way we were able to obtain this letter for Saeed, this kind of Christmas message for those he knows around the world who are praying for him and working to see his release, and also to a note to his family. We know, Mark, that as we speak, the nuclear negotiations have once again restarted with Iran and the United States government. And we're told by the State Department that he's part of those discussions on the sidelines, not part of the actual nuclear deal. And we don't believe he should be. But we do think at a time when we see another American returning home from a wrongful imprisonment in Cuba, that you know, we should have Saeed Abedini and other Americans home from Iran, especially as we get close to the Christmas holiday.
Have you heard any reaction from his wife and family to the letter?
We have, and we posted that reaction as well, but I know that it's a very difficult time. And Naghmeh actually did something different than before, but she almost wrote a public message, it is really a public message, to Saeed about staying strong and the prayers that are going on and the work that's going on. And she's a tireless advocate.
Do you think we're going to see Pastor Saeed released anytime soon? You know,
I think that we have to carefully monitor the U.S. Negotiations with Iran. And I would take today's news, you know, when Alan Gross, the American who was being held in Cuba for nearly 3 years, or more than that, since 2009, so 5 years. So you just don't know what's going to happen when you wake up. You got to keep doing the work that you do, that we do to get Saeed home, and we ask people to continue to pray. And when we have a specific action item for them, that they still take part in that.
Okay, Jordan Seculo with the American Center for Law and Justice. Thank you for your time, Jordan.
Thanks, Mark.
Unlike last Christmas, many Iraqi Christians say they're finding little to celebrate this year. Chased from their homes by Islamic State terrorists, many are still struggling in refugee camps.
That's right. Few will celebrate the holiday season in their own homes. CBN, though, is on the scene trying to bring them comfort and encouragement. Gary Lane brings us the story from Kurdistan.
Despite recent military gains against the Islamic State, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi Christians, ethnic Yazidis, and others are still residing in temporary shelters. They fled ISIS atrocities last summer. Many are now receiving food and clothing, but their needs are changing as winter sets in.
This last summer, when we were here in August and September, we were really looking at providing water. Mostly importantly was to keep people hydrated because it was hot, days of 120 degrees. The real big challenge is for having physical comfort. Our goal here is to provide ample winterization products.
So what better time than Christmas to come bearing gifts?
We are so happy to be here with you. We are Christians from the United States, and we have just come to show you God's love.
Not only are Iraqi Christians and Yazidis in desperate need of help this Christmas, but also Syrians, refugees from the city of Kobani. The women say their husbands are away in that city, fighting a life and death struggle against ISIS. These women recently arrived in Erbil with their children. This 24-year-old says her husband stayed behind in Kobani to fight the Islamic terrorists.
Please pray for him so as to come and join his family.
And to keep them warm, the Kobani families received carpets to cover cold and drafty floors. Their children were given gloves to warm their hands, heavy woolen blankets, and pillows. Each family was given a gas tank and heater, along with a portable cooking stove.
Thank you so very, very much. No one has done anything for us. You are the first.
Some displaced Iraqis told us they needed powdered milk and diapers for their children. So CBN provided those necessities in partnership with the Barzani Charitable Trust Foundation.
Just because the fighting is not presently close to this area doesn't mean that people aren't fighting for their lives. They're fighting for their lives for warmth, they're fighting for their lives with sustenance, they're fighting for their lives with medical needs on a daily basis. CBN is here for the long haul.
CBN is not just here to take care of the physical needs of these people, although that's very important. We're here to take care of the spiritual needs.
The Yazidis warmly welcomed CBN Disaster Relief Director Ron Oates.
They were willing to listen to us, our personal witnessing and our personal testimony, and we felt that they were open to listening to the gospel.
God loves you and wants a good future for you.
We want to foretell the Word of God and demonstrate in tangible ways how God can meet the needs of people.
CBN is meeting the material needs of thousands of beleaguered Iraqis and Syrians. But it's also bringing them the greatest gift this Christmas, the reason for the season. Word of a baby born in a manger, a loving Messiah who offers them eternal hope and life. Gary Lane, CBN News, Iraqi Kurdistan.
Coming up, how the conflict in Ukraine is growing more dangerous by the day, and the Christian ministry that's putting itself in the crossfire to help victims.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. 8 years ago, my husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Inside every child is a hero, a leader, a friend to others, someone who helps out, who does the right thing, who dreams of what they can be, but they still need our help.
What should I do? What should I say? How should I feel?
That's where Superbook comes in. It provides moral and spiritual truths through situations children can relate to, teaching God's Word to the children you love. Join the Superbook DVD Club and receive Superbook's newest episodes as they're available, plus 2 copies to share with others, all for your gift of only $25. Get Superbook today and watch the miracles happen.
The Russian bear is wounded, its economy is crumbling, and some fear Vladimir Putin may lash out to prove he's still in charge. The target, his vulnerable neighbor, Ukraine.
Putin's Russian rebels have been meddling in Ukraine all year, leaving 4,000 people dead and 10,000 injured. And every day, people are fleeing the conflict zone. Ukraine puts the blame squarely on Russia for this latest crisis, accusing them of invading their territory and backing gunmen who now control large areas of Donetsk and Luhansk. Kiev says Moscow wants to build a land corridor that connects the Russian mainland with the Crimean Peninsula, which Russia seized from Ukraine in March. Now, with falling oil prices and Russia's economy teetering on collapse, some wonder if Vladimir Putin will use this latest development to back down or venture deeper into Ukrainian territory. In eastern Ukraine, a fragile ceasefire is supposed to stop the bloodshed. That hasn't happened yet. For those living on the front lines, the past 9 months have been a harrowing ordeal.
I'm on the phone constantly, connecting refugees with potential families who want to help.
Tamara Dudnik is from the eastern city of Slavyansk. When pro-Russian rebels invaded this part of the country in April, She and her husband, prominent Ukrainian pastor Peter Dudnik, risked their lives to help those caught in the conflict.
It started out very simply. Someone called my cell and asked if we could help get them out of a city that was under fire from rebels. We made some calls and got them out. Word spread out about what we did, and soon people were calling us from all over the region.
Every week now since that first phone call back in April, the Dudniks, with the help of CBN's Orphans Promise and several Ukrainian churches, helped hundreds of families escape from rebel-held territories in the east.
We are a lifeline for families. Some of them call us saying, "Save us, save us."
For several months now, Orphans Promise has been running a hotline connecting a stream of refugees coming out of the war zone here in the east and the Crimean Peninsula, with families and churches willing to help.
Getting them out of the conflict zone was one thing, but then we had to find places for them to stay. We had to take care of their health needs, feed them, and get them warm clothes for the winter.
More than 1 million people fled eastern Ukraine.
Most of them left their homes with little more than the clothes on their backs. They lost everything. They have nothing.
So for now, as winter sets in, the conflict, which has internally displaced more than 500,000 people, shows no sign of ending anytime soon. It's such a tragedy. 4,000 plus people who have died, 10,000 who've been injured. And folks, we just need to pray for the situation there, and also pray for Russia too.
Yeah, and pray for our reporters like George and Gary who are going into these hot spots. Well done,
You're
my
very
brother.
kind. Thank you.
Well done. Well, up next, the Christian world of Bilbo, Gandalf, and Frodo go inside the mind of the Lord of the Rings author. That's next.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes and Google Play now.
CBNnews.com. News you want, when you want, 24/7. Stay current with up-to-the-minute stories.
Efrem Graham, CBN News, New York.
I don't have to wait for my news anymore. CBNnews.com at your fingertips all day long.
I only watch the stories I want to see. I find the story, I click on it, and boom, I'm there.
Embassy in Washington, Eric Stakelbeck, CBN News.
The source for your news, CBNnews.com.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. 8 years ago, my husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Well, the Battle of the Five Armies hit theaters this week, and fans of The Hobbit are heading to Middle-earth one last time. That's the world created by the legendary author and Oxford professor J.R.R. Tolkien.
That's right. His works, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, are the second and third most read novels of all time. And as Paul Strand reports, these great reads are loaded with Christian wisdom.
As The Hobbit, Battle of the Five Armies hits theaters and ends an entertainment series that was decades in the making. But a new book, The Hobbit Party, points out that entertainment is just a part of these Middle-earth movies and the J.R.R. Tolkien books they're based on.
Tolkien had more to offer than just a really good yarn.
According to co-author Jay Richards, they also portray an entire universe of moral, government, and economic systems. That's why it's subtitled The Vision of Freedom That Tolkien Got and the West Forgot. evil, power-crazed Sauron came out of Tolkien's experience of witnessing the brutalities of fascism and Nazism in World War II and the communist cruelty that followed.
There's a theme throughout The Lord of the Rings of a concern for the centralization of power. I mean, the ring itself, the ring of power that the good guys spend the entire story trying to get rid of, not trying to gain, this power to dominate the will of others.
While World War I vet Tolkien hated the senseless slaughter of war, he loved liberty even more, so his heroes constantly fought for it in The Lord of the Rings.
A day may come when the courage of men fails.
The good guys in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, they recognize that sometimes you need to fight, you need to be willing to die, and the cause in every case that they're willing to die for is freedom.
Tolkien said he was a hobbit in all but height, and the Shire where hobbits lived reflected not only his idyllic childhood hometown, but the way he thought society should run, a place of almost no laws and only a tiny bit of government. He admitted to his son he leaned towards anarchy and hated the idea of people lording it over other people.
Tolkien said famously, "It is the most improper job of any man to boss others, least of all those who seek the opportunity."
Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings as he watched Britain slide into a soft socialism. He was horrified the citizens of the Christian nations would give up their God-given liberty in exchange for security offered by all-powerful governments.
It would essentially be docile sheep guided by the shepherd.
He was hopeful art like his could shake them up and wake them up. As for economics, hippies dug The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings because they saw Tolkien as a cool anti-capitalist, and that creating creatures like the aristocratic Smaug was his way to show it. But Richard says Tolkien used the character to illustrate the absolute worst traits of a wealthy, non-investing, non-capitalist.
There you are, thief in the shadows.
Who sits atop literally a pile of gold that belongs to other people. This is not a critique of the capitalist or the entrepreneur. This is the critique of the miser who hoards his wealth rather than putting at risk. That's what enterprise is about.
Tolkien portrayed prosperous worlds of robust capitalism and free trade at the end of both books.
A widening trade, not just between different sort of human populations or different cities, but actually interspecies trade between hobbits and dwarves and elves and men.
Gardener Sam personifies the world working at its best as he creates wealth with his hands and the future with his wife.
Puts together both our economic activity as creatures made as stewards in the image of God, to steward and to till and to keep the garden, and also to multiply, to have children.
The deeply Christian Tolkien intentionally used humble hobbits as heroes, a way to show that even the least of us deeply matters and can change our world for the better.
It only occurred to someone who had this vision that the creator of the universe could become incarnate as a man born of a woman in a stable in a humble village. It's only that kind of vision that I would think would lead someone to think to create heroes like hobbits.
I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you.
Near the climax of Lord of the Rings, it's the humble servant Sam who literally bears Frodo like a cross and saves the world.
And I hope that speaks to us as human beings, especially those of us that might think, well, who am I? What important position am I playing? Well, take some inspiration from Frodo and from Sam.
Great advice. You can find daily reports about the work of the church around the globe. Just go to our Christian World News webpage. Find it at cbnnews.com. We'll be back right after this.
Give me that. Bye. Sure, life is busy, but I found a way to make a huge difference in people's lives. I guess you could say I'm changing the world right here from home. I bring medical supplies and doctors to people in need, and dig wells so that villagers can have clean and safe water to drink. I make it possible to preach the gospel in over 100 countries, including right here in America. And when disaster strikes, I'm there, providing food, thank you, and emergency supplies to give people hope again. Every day, CBN and I are making the world a better place. Here you go. My life is hectic, so I joined CBN through Pledge Express. My bank does all the work, and I know that my gift is being used where it's needed most. So become a CBN partner and join Pledge Express, because you can do a world of good right from where you are. Hi, good morning. Are you ready to get started?
We all want to live in the favor and anointing of God. We want His wisdom to solve problems and His provision for all we need. The Bible tells us the Lord has put eternity in our hearts. Each of us wants the certainty of heaven. to know our lives have purpose and that we are playing a vital role in accomplishing His plan for all mankind.
In Pat and Gordon Robertson's latest DVD teaching, Living Under God's Blessing, you'll discover how to receive wisdom to solve today's problems, the keys to provision for meeting all your needs, and how you can be a part of His plan for the world today. Call now to receive Living Under God's Blessing, featuring the 3-time Emmy-nominated series, Made in Israel.
May God bless you, and may you enjoy and live under the blessing of the Lord always.
Living Under God's Blessing, available now.
Finally today, December 25th is almost upon us, and the big cities are full of Christmas displays and holiday lights.
They certainly are. CBN News reporter Angela Zatopek takes us to New York City for the sights and sounds of the Christmas season.
It's the most wonderful time of the year, and by it, we mean Christmas. New York City lights up with Christmas trees, Christmas lights, and you can't help but notice the famous window displays. Macy's is not only well known for the parade of all parades, but also for its window displays. Holiday onlookers can't help but notice the glittering decor.
Here in the city makes me feel like a little kid. Everything is great, lights beautiful.
One of this year's windows tells the tale of Alex, a young boy with a magic telescope who experiences Christmas on other planets with his dog, Bella. This story comes to life using 3D and high-definition features. Another connection that Macy's has with Christmas is the 1947 film Miracle on 34th Street. Now, I want to do some investigating and find out who knows the film associated with where we're standing right now. What holiday film is associated with Macy's and Christmas?
I need my wife's help on this. Adrian?
We got a lifeline here. What film is associated with Macy's and Christmas time?
Miracle on 34th Street?
Yeah! What film is associated with Macy's and Christmas time?
Actually, I don't know. I have no idea about that.
It's a blank on 34th Street.
Blank on 34th Street? I'm not sure. I don't know either.
Miracle on 34th Street. No?
Oh.
I need an NYPD group answer here. Is associated with Macy's and Christmas time?
Miracle on 34th Street.
Yes. Okay, see, not everyone knows that.
Miracle on 42nd Street?
42nd Street?
I don't know. What is
Or 34th Street?
34th Street, okay.
Okay, you got it right. After looking at all these window displays, I cannot decide which one is my favorite. But whether you're in the city, a suburb, or in the country, I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas and God bless. I'm Angela Zatopek, CBN News, New York City.
There's no city like New York during Christmas.
I remember my first Macy's Day Parade. I was 17 years old in the big city.
It really is incredible.
Incredible.
Well, that's all for this week's edition of Christian World News.
Until next week, goodbye. And from all of us here, God bless you.